So today we are recognizing various leaders for amazing victories that we had. And we don't normally recognize someone like Federal Transit Administrator Peter Rogoff. But this is about, 10 connects real people's experiences and their communities and the issues that they are affected by with federal policy. And Mr. Rogoff has done that as well. And you came to St. Paul and to many other cities and saw that racial inequities were actually going to be perpetuated by a transit project, that communities were going to be amputated from one another. And in St. Paul, this billion-dollar project was going to skip over the most transit-dependent neighborhood along the Central Corridor. In Oakland, a $500 million project was going to run roughshod over a community that's 98% people of color, and over its own civil rights obligations. You not only took action on these projects, Mr. Rogoff, but you changed the landscape for civil rights enforcement and for actually making transit an instrument for racial and economic justice that it can be in bringing communities together and connecting people to opportunity. So, Mr. Rogoff, we welcome you as a friend and champion of civil rights in the FTA. Please join me in honoring Mr. Rogoff with the first annual Rosa Parks Award.
Well, thank you, everybody. I have to say, I'm a Jew from New York, and talking comes easy to me. But when someone puts my name together with Rosa Parks, it gets hard. You said when you came in that we had a move-on schedule because there was important people in the room, and I think we just met them. These are the people that are actually affecting change in the community. I get to work toward affecting change from a high perch in a federal bureaucracy. And I think it's appropriate, and I'm grateful that you're gifting people with the writings of our president, because frankly, all of this change derives from the fact that we have a new president. As I've said in a number of public settings, I'm blessed to be the Federal Transit Administrator in this administration because we have a president who probably took more transit trips in 1 week of his life than his predecessor took over the entirety of his life. And that is not to slam the former president, but just to make a statement of fact. So when I have to go and make a pitch about the importance of transit to this White House, I don't have to argue for very long. Coming on down from the president himself, and in fact the vice president, who was an absolute transit and transportation fanatic when I worked with him in the Senate. Few senators yelled at me more in my 21 years in working in the Senate than Joe Biden. In fact, I'm still a little hard of hearing in this ear. but it's all for the good now. And the other person, and I'm not doing this just because it's in the job description, but I really want to give credit to Ray LaHood. When we first came in as a team under this new administration, we had a lot of things staring us in the face that needed changing. The cost effectiveness index was just one of them. But none of those changes come easy. Not all of them can just be done with a swipe of a pen. They need outreach. They need convincing other partners in the administration, including senior people who were there in 2005 when the cost effectiveness index was imposed as the only criterion for these projects. I appreciate you crediting the FTA with having made that change, but it doesn't happen without the leadership of people like Secretary LaHood, who's a very community-oriented politician. I mean, he worked up here in the House as a staff person, then he was a member of the House, very focused on the home community and constantly questioning us as to what impact these highfalutin policy ideas are going to have on the people that these programs are meant to serve. And that played a lot into the examples in Minnesota. It is hard to identify any project in the nation that serves as a better indicator about why that policy had to be changed than the situation in Ramsey County. Literally, they were about the business of building the largest infrastructure project ever built in the state of Minnesota. And it was going to run right down the heart of a community and just whiz past the residents of those community and just say with each passing movement, yeah, we spent a lot of money on this, but it wasn't for you. And it got really what, out to what I sometimes refer to as the lunatic fringe, in that they were literally going to build the foundations for stations in those communities, but not the stations themselves. It's kind of like dangling the lollipop in front of your 4-year-old. I mean, it's insulting, and it was, when I had to make the rounds and pitch why this policy change had to be made, nothing served as a better example than those useless foundations for stations that weren't going to get built. So I really want to thank the residents and the people who really took this fight on in Minnesota. As I was quoted, it's sometimes hard to, we're working very hard to make sure that folks in senior levels of the administration remain in touch with the communities they were sent, that not only sent us here, but who were intended to serve. In this particular case, folks found me on the line at Starbucks at a hotel in Boston. And that is what really started our direct dialogue on this issue, and told me that I needed to go out there and meet with the folks involved and make those changes. And it was a very good win-win story, and we're now going to build it, and we're going to build those stations, and we've sort of expedited our environmental approval processes to make sure that they could be built on schedule with the rest of the system. We're not going to have 2 tiers of we'll build these stations now and those stations later. And fortunately, when we were able to break through this, the community has stood up to help. We're going to cost share in those stations, but there had to be funds put up by the community themselves. I want to talk a little bit about what transpired in Oakland. Oakland, the airport connector, as was pointed out, was a project that went through many changes over its history. I don't necessarily relish being in a position of having to deny funds for projects. That's not the model that I see going forward. It's not about not building projects. It's about building those projects right the first time. And that is what fell apart in Oakland in a very unfortunate fashion. And yes, I believe it is sending a signal around the country that flagrant violations of Title VI won't be tolerated. And the way we make sure that happens is make sure that we are putting out clear guidance to our grantees, and where people have a clear understanding of what's required of them, and they understand that it needs to be done. It is especially important now when you have a situation where, even with the $8.7 billion in Recovery Act dollars that we've put out there for public transit, we still have service cuts going on. We still have layoffs going on. It's inherent in systems that are dependent on sales tax revenues when sales are down. Some of our transit agencies even depend on personal property transfer taxes. They're dependent on real estate sales for some of their money, and everyone knows what's happened with that. So there are communities that are suffering from the loss of transit service across the country. We are looking at that with our eyes wide open. One other subtle difference that you'll see between this administration and the last one is we're not hiding in the sand and pretending that those cuts aren't going on. We are warehousing information on what's going on. We are letting, frankly, there's not a lot we can do about it. We put a historic amount of money on the street, and we certainly kept some services from being cut. We are certainly keeping some people on the employment rolls that otherwise wouldn't be. But in the current economic situation, there's not necessarily another $8.7 billion to back up this one. But we are working with agencies on how to best have the flexibilities in the law to address those circumstances to keep transit service alive.